Hello one, hello all, it's the gothiest ghost of them all, Caspa in the flesh, and it's time for a review of Mac Miller, Balloonerism. This is the shelved release of Mac Miller, singer, songwriter, producer, and honestly, after listening to this like a bunch of times, I really have to say that Warner Bros. Really dropped the ball on this one. They really fumbled the ball on this one. Because truly and honestly, this is a great LP. And after years of Mac's tragic passing in 2018 due to a drug overdose, I have wondered if we were going to get anything from Mac Miller, and following up with that year, which I believe was 2020, if I'm not mistaken, we got another release, which was Circles, which was honestly, truly and honestly, his most heart-wrenching, moving record yet, and his best for that time. And this record here was actually set to release in the midst of the watching movies with the sound off Faces era. And with Faces, I found to be a paradigm shift in the most wonderful way, really, because on that record, I loved the production on there, I loved Mac's bars on there, so there were definitely a lot of improvements on that. However, when it came to watching movies with the sound off, I felt like it was very much a decline in quality, as that thing just really didn't have much of a direction, a place. I just really thought it was just a meandering record, which really baffles me because there is definitely a dichotomous position for this record here for Balloonerism, because this really sounds like a more polished and more enjoyable record than anything off of movies with the sound off. But the thing is, maybe it was too dark, maybe it was too daring, I suppose. But honestly, I think any Mac Miller fan would have took this and said, no, this is an excellent record, this is deep, this is compelling, what the fuck are you doing? Because on this, he's diving more into neo-soul, jazz rap, experimental. This is easily his most experimental record yet. But I will say though, this thing is super druggy. Like, this thing is probably the equivalent of, honestly, the most tripped out animated drug-soaked cartoon you'd probably ever listen to. However, it's not filled with a bunch of wacky, over-the-top, nonsensical bars. No, this thing is honestly very deep. It's honestly very compelling, and a very cathartic psychedelic ride as Mac goes into these numerous scenarios, philosophies, meditations, and honestly he does it so well and goes way more into neo-psychedelia here. But listening to this over and over, I'm really starting to think maybe they were scared this would hurt sales. But as I look at the reception of this thing was very positive. So I'm just struggling to understand what was the issue with releasing this record. And as far as singles go, I think they were very indicative of what to expect on this LP, such as $5 Pony Rides. And the instrumentation here sounds very live, it sounds very raw. Even though you are getting a lot of embellishments here, it doesn't take away from how natural. It doesn't really take away from the playing on this record, as this has live sets of various percussion, the warm jazzy bass, and also you'll notice with the bass work how melodic it is, how psychedelic it is, how tangible it is. It is done by the one and only Thundercat, who contributed to Kendrick's fantastic TPAB. Psychedelic synth chords, the passionate shouty refrains. Like, I feel like this thing is like a combination of A Tribe Called Quest meets Kendrick Lamar's TPAB. And due to the fact that you are getting Kendrickisms on this record, it's really no surprise that the same person who engineered Good Kid, Mad City also mastered this record. And another thing too, this project is a very solidly structured project. So for the time being, as it felt like watching movies from the sound off had really no direction, no structure, this thing is tight. Like, for as psychedelic and tripped out as it is, this is a very tight listening experience. But I should also mention too how a majority of these tracks, Mac Miller does sound a little flirty in here, but as you dive deep into the lyrics, you'll see it's not exactly as flirtatious and not a love song by any stretch of the imagination. This is actually really dark topically, like touching on scenarios and like stories of women who are going through very troubling circumstances, as this one ventures into lyrics of this woman who has experienced abandonment, isolation, desolation, deprivation of her childhood. And while having fun at one point in her life, it seems like she's circled back into despair once again, into experiencing bleakness. And Mac here is supposed to be the healing factor and also the support that she wants. I feel like it's certainly one of those tracks that could get radio play if the people who were putting this on weren't paying attention to the lyrics, because I feel this does speak to a certain audience. So while this thing does have commercial radio appeal, I'm also struggling to see like why you wouldn't play this. But again, I kind of get it and I kind of don't. And there's also Funny Papers, whose somber bass melodies, heavy thunderous drums, solemn but spotlit pianos, in a way kind of reminding me of something Kanye would have put out back in the day, like Late Registration, College Dropout era. Instrumentally, there are a lot of subtle progressions here, which leaves space and really creates like an emotional reaction. You're also getting the impact that the track is going for. And also I feel like the bass here really creates a foundation for Mac to do his storytelling, really create a lot of emphasis for his bars, as he's delineating these stories that are a mix of tragedy but also happiness, that I believe to be the articles of headlines, as the stories do have tie-ins, I believe, to Mac's life in a way, as he does these very tragic, bittersweet play on words. There's certainly a lot of irony into what he's saying, not in a comedic sense, but ironic in a way like getting rich on April Fool's Day, which is a day someone would normally fall for something fraudulent. And I would say with a lot of these bars, and I'll probably say this throughout the review, there's a lot of bars on here that really do strike a chord, because it really does hit different, especially with Mac's passing. So it is very hard to swallow at times. Also, I feel like there is metaphorical sequence within the track, and if you listen to it, you really know what I mean. And the layered vocal harmonies for Mac, I think, are great. Also, this album does have a lot of stories that Mac does fantastic narration on. Mostly lives of women struggling with depression, mental health, generational trauma. Case in point, Friendly Hallucinations, where you're having this troubling story of this woman who is schizophrenic, but not only is she schizophrenic, but also she becomes addicted to the medication that she is supposed to be taking, and Mac is personifying the feeling. She's personifying the emotions that she is taking on. She's taking on the addiction to what is trying to help her, but what is trying to help her is also her. But what is also trying to help her is also hurting her at the same time. And the whole track feels like a hypnotic cross between an old school Eminem song and, oddly enough, a Tyler the Creator song, but I would say more Flower Boy type vibe. However, it's weird to say that, because this came out, well, it was supposed to be released and it was recorded before Flower Boy was even thought of. Like, it just absolutely fascinates me. And I love the squishy and drifting synths. that are just wailing with these cavernous drums, echoing vocals, quick shots of vocal sample cuts, and the bright, warm organs, lumbering bass makes this thing feel even more trippy. I feel like there's something like tilting as I'm listening to this. And there's also another cut in the same vein topically called Stoned, with these heavy, bluesy sample guitar leads, heavily reverb delayed drums, and bubbly chords that sound like they're descending into the beat. Like the whole thing sounds so immersed in the ocean. That describes this woman who is yearning for escapism, but also struggles with reality. Very much a hypochondriac, just failing to be truthful. And I feel Mac plays the personification of maybe this substance that is helping her, wishing she could love herself more, be more outgoing, again, be more truthful. There's also the endearing and cute Excelsior that has these warped reverse piano chords, chunky disembodied drums, and these reverb panoramic vocals. And I feel they really do serve a purpose and really make the narration stick out, because the vocals here are just right in the center. They're just speaking directly to you as he speaks on these times, these simpler times before adulthood, but still speaks on concerning upbringings and scenarios that children do face, like the jealousy aspect, the bully aspect. Like times are simpler, just playing, doing cartwheels, drinking apple juice, until the indoctrination that follows into adulthood that, you know, adults do experience or can experience. And I love the light harmonies here. Sound of kids playing, Max shouting these random playful refrains, playful ad-libs. Abacanouche! Excelsior! You know, things children say when they're in Fantasyland, when they're playing pretend. Another thing I love about this record is how detailed it is. While there are embellishments, but I feel it's embellishments for the sake of creating this other world, creating this inner mental tripped out experience. Like, it really does make you feel like you're on the longest trip of LSD you've ever been on, like with DJ's organ chord. And I swear, the linear feeling of this track, the very otherworldly but warm organ chords, there's so much eeriness, so much embellishment. It honestly sounds to me like the microphones in a way, like something Phil Elverum would have done. And SZA's voice here is so fucking night and day in comparison to how she sounds now. She sounds great now, but back then she sounded very raw. Like her voice had such like a sultry pitch to it, very raspy, some very raspy moans here, sounding very much Badu-ish. And also Mac's echoed elastic vocals here are very unsettling and creepy. Like it sounds like he's shouting to me from the other side, which transitions fantastically into Do You Have a Destination, that have some very haunting lyrics that do play into a lot of the lyrical content that is on this record. Very unsettling, very psychedelic but mournful psychedelic keys and chords, as Mac really dives into depression, struggling with his mental health, a lot of vocal modulations, and lyrically I feel connects to the sentiments of this record, as Mac shares his own pain on here. And listening to this, as fantastically produced as this record is, and how great of an artist Mac is, he really does show a lot of humbleness on this record, and really showing signs like early before his passing, like speaking on his struggles with fame, the pressures of that, drugs, and the same sentiments also shared on Miss Debbie Downer. But definitely a more grim territory, with a very gloomy set of instrumentation, fat drums, glimmering bittersweet chords. It's very, very jazz rap, as Mac delves more into substance abuse. I feel the lyrics here are definitely indicative of Mac's unfortunate passing, and with how ghostly the vocals are here, how hauntingly ghostly and spirit-like the vocals are here, it really does feel like this is coming in form of a memory, like he's speaking to you from the spirit world. And as far as the fame aspect, he definitely speaks on that as well when it comes to being humble. So there is lyrics in that respect on Rick's piano, as in Rick Rubin's piano, as Mac makes these statements of people who've earned their flowers and lets that go to their head, and all of a sudden starts thinking they're bigger than their existence. Mostly a inflation of ego. And on here, speaking on a myriad of philosophies, questioning life, questioning death. And all these lyrics really do build on the production here and really do show how passionate Mac was, how much of a visionary he was. And with saying all these things, making these statements, it really does add a lot of power to the record. There's also these immensely large, dense, marching strings and drums that are coalescing with these gigantic strums of harp strings with a large soulful chorus. And great verses from Mac, a lot of thoughtful lyricism. The only tracks here I wasn't really too crazy about are more of the interlude-centric tracks. Like, mainly the ones that didn't really sound finished or dragged on too long, and I didn't really think contributed to anything to the record, such as transformations. But other than the weaker tracks here, I'm really left wondering, again, why this was shelved. Because this is honestly Mac's best work. Like, something so focused, something so surreal, something so powerful, something that could have helped people who are in this crisis, something very tangible, something very relatable. Like, it's honestly so cutting edge, so otherworldly, and definitely better than the slog of an album that watching movies with the sound off was. But honestly, I'm glad this saw the light of day, because it's an excellent record. It's certainly an LP I hope Mac Miller fans are appreciating and loving, because the writing is great, production's fantastic, Mac's vocal performances have a lot of passion, and certainly a gem, a diamond in the rough, for sure. I'm feeling a 4 out of 5 black hearts on this record. If you've heard this, what did you think? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Why? And that's it. Caspa, Gothic Ghost, Mac Miller, Balloonerism. Till we meet again.